Afternoon. This is Haley with JumpRope. I also have on the line Jenna today presenting for you. Welcome to our webinar for the change of term logistics. So most of our schools at this time of the year have gotten through a term, at least a trimester, or are starting to think about the semester change that's coming up soon. So hopefully today we can answer some of the general frequently asked questions that we get about change of term and get you off on the right foot for the next part of the school year. Okay. So just a few things that I always like to talk about at the beginning of our webinars. First of all, remember that our website is jumprope.pe. You can follow us at Twitter. You can follow us on Facebook as well. And as always, our support address is support@jumprope.pe. So at the end of today's session, if we haven't answered any of your questions, or if you have questions that are really specific to your school site, sending in a support request to us is probably going to be the best choice for that. So a couple things to remember while we're here on this webinar. First of all, if you have questions during this webinar, we're going to be monitoring anything that you enter into the questions box in your GoToWebinar toolbar control panel. Jenna's going to be monitoring those and answering back to you as best that she can. If anything, any of the questions seem like they apply to the entire group, we'll be sure to mention them to everyone. Again, I just want to clarify that this webinar is really kind of the basics. It's going to cover our frequently asked questions, and there are really a lot of customized options that might not be relevant to your school, or we might not cover a specific topic that really is important to your school. So you can ask that in the questions box. Jenna might ask you to send in a support request, or she might be able to answer it directly. Okay. Another thing is that we're going to be recording this webinar, and anybody who has registered will receive an auto email with information on how to access it, and that will come likely within the next week after we've closed out this webinar. Okay. So our topics for today are really going to be, we're going to discuss what a term is in JumpRope. Whoops. We're going to discuss what a term is in JumpRope and what a marking period is and what the difference between both of them are. They really have a specific definition within the JumpRope construct that might be a little different to how you use this language outside of JumpRope. So we'll discuss that a little bit. We're going to talk about student data and how you can access past scores for students if you do change a term, how you can finalize grades or export those grades or scores to so that you can enter them into something more permanent like your SIS. And then we'll also have a little discussion about archiving items from your plan tab, when you should do it, who should do it, and why you would even do that. Okay. So today I really wanted to point out a little bit of the language that I'm going to be using as I discuss things. We have two versions of JumpRope, generally two main versions, and you may or may not know this. But today, some of the items that I discuss are going to be referencing specifically what we call the Legacy Plan tab. So if your plan tab looks like this picture on the left, that's what we call the Legacy Plan tab. And some of the information today will be specific to Legacy Plan tab users, and some will be specific to the other plan tab, our newer plan tab. It's called Plan Beta, or the Super Plan tab. And it looks like this when you're logged into your Teacher Dashboard Plan Beta tab. So I'll be using those terms, Legacy and Plan Beta. Just keep that in mind as you're listening along today. So the first topic that I really wanted to discuss was this difference between what in JumpRope is called a term and a marking period. So a term in JumpRope is a distinct time period for a course, and it is generally when your rosters change. So really the JumpRope definition of a term is that your schedule information is going to change. Your student group is going to change. It's built to work more smoothly with high school and middle school setups. Generally speaking, an elementary school will not have more than one term, right? It's important to note that if you do choose to begin a new term, so some of you have expressed concern, you've seen the Begin New Term Wizard button pop up in your, you see Begin New Term Wizard pop up in your admin console. If you do choose to go through that and you change to Term 2 or Term 3, you need to be prepared for all of your schedule information to change. So the next time, after going through that wizard, the next time that a teacher logs into their account, to their teacher dashboard, they will see the second term schedule, okay, only if you've made sure to upload that information via your SIS. So if we don't have the data from your overnight sync or from your manual scheduler, from your SIS, if JumpRope doesn't have that data and you do the term change, teachers will log in the next time and their schedules will be blank. All right, so something to consider and to be really prepared for. Excuse me. You really want to, if you're considering having more than one term for the year, really the majority of your schedules and rosters need to change at some point during the year. If that's not the case, and your classes are mostly year-long, then you'll set up one term per year. And we'll take a look in an admin console here in a second. So a marking period is a preset date range within a term. So this is a choice where you can set up, maybe if you have 2 semesters, and you want to set up the first 10 weeks and the second 10 weeks as kind of pseudo-separate entries, or entities, excuse me. You can set up Term 1 marking period for that first date range and Term 1 marking period 2 for that second date range. All of the mastery reports within the JumpRope app will default to the most current marking period. Okay? But teachers and users can always toggle through and select their own date range as well beyond the default. So let's take a look right now at where you can find this information, where you set up your term and marking periods, just to remind you of this. So in your school's admin console, all of your schedule information is here in the settings section. When you click on schedule, you choose your number of terms here. For this example, we're going to use the 1 term all year example. Then down here below, when you set the term date, clicking on term 1 here and setting in your calendar dates opens up for you, whoops, let's make this a little more realistic. Opens up the marking period window. So let's say the majority of my courses, my schedule rosters don't change throughout the year, but I do want to look at things in sections. So I'm going to add a marking period here, and I'm actually, let's say I'm going to add 3 marking periods. Choosing this 1 allows me now to set a start date and end date for my first marking period. And I can choose that to be maybe it's my first term, right? Then I can change my second marking period and my third marking period. And what this does is it sets those defaults in mastery reports for teachers. Okay. So let's look in a teacher account and see what this looks like. So now in your course's mastery report, this teacher has a drop-down menu that has defaulted to the current marking period, the one that we are actually lying within, and they can also set their dates to be first marking period. They can set it to be the whole year. Oops. Or they can, in fact, manually set the dates as well to view whatever set of data they would like. Okay. So the real important thing here to remember, if you are considering a term, is that if your schedule is, just to know, that your schedule is going to change. Teachers are going to log in and they're going to see a new schedule as soon as you do this begin new term. Okay? So make sure that your schedule information is set up for the second term within your, from your SIS and in your sync to us. One exception to the rule that if the majority of your classes last a full year, to include just one term, is if you have a need at the semester or at the trimester to finalize student grades maybe for an outside entity, right? If you do have a need to finalize those grades at certain points within the year, you would set up your terms to match that. That will help to preserve your term grades independently of one another versus showing growth over the full year, right? So you might consider changing the term even if your schedule does not change or it only changes for some courses. The benefit here, if you're an administrator, is that when you do go through the Begin New Term wizard, it asks if you would like to auto-archive teacher plan tabs. And if you are finalizing grades at a semester, you'll definitely want to auto-archive for teachers. So that being said, let's move into talking about archiving and what that means. So I'm going to go back into my teacher dash here. And I'm going to move into, this is for Plan Beta users. Archiving your units can be done by teachers individually, or it can be done, like I said, through the New Term wizard. The purpose of archiving your units is kind of twofold. One, it's to clean up your plan tab. In the Plan Beta or Super Plan tab, if you had a list of all your units from the beginning of the year, this list starts to get pretty long and cumbersome. So archiving each unit helps you to clean up that list, right? Here's a look at our Legacy Plan tab as well. Our units list can get pretty long and cumbersome here as well. So when you archive a unit from the Super Plan tab or the Plan Beta tab, you can just click this little Edit Settings wheel, and it'll open the settings or details box for this unit that I'm in. And I can choose to archive here. what archiving does in both plan tabs is it essentially freezes the assessments and standards that are associated with this unit. It removes them from your easily accessible area in your plan tab, and it's a way that you can finalize dates on your assessments and finalize your standards that are within your unit. Now, even if you archive a unit, you can go back to that unit through your grade tab and change and adjust or edit scores for students, but you cannot change assessment titles, assessment dates. You can't add or delete standards. It's essentially a frozen unit. Okay. So let's take a look at what this looks like in our Plan Beta tab. If I archive this unit, it says it's going to essentially hide it from my Plan and Grade tab. Right? I can still view and clone the curriculum in case I'd like to use it later. I'm just going to go ahead and archive it. If I refresh this tab, oops, that sample 3 is no longer available in my list. Now, let's say that I want to I maybe want to clone that unit, like it was, maybe I'm teaching 2 different sections of the same course, first semester and second semester. In my Manage Units menu, this is again for Plan Beta, my sample 3 unit that I just archived is listed here along with all my other units. If I choose to edit it, I open the cloning tool here. I can give it a new name, assign it a course, and then I can clone with a couple of these different options. Clone with the standards only, clone everything, means cloning standards and assessments, clone everything with dates, clones my standards, my assessments, and their dates. Again, this is cloning or making a new copy if I want to reuse this set of curriculum. So what I'd like to do now is kind of go through the same process that I just did, but in the Legacy Plan tab. So in the Legacy Plan tab here, if we wanted to archive a unit individually, I just select Edit here, and then Archive is in the same location. Does the same function. And now when I refresh my Plan tab, whoops, oh, it doesn't have a date. Archive, there we go. So now my units list is shorter, and to access that unit that I archived, I would find it here, and there it is. It's called Term 2 Writing. Now to do the cloning, if I want to use that curriculum again, I can click Clone and I get the clone details box here. In the Grade tab, here's what archiving looks like. And again, I'm in the Super Plan this time. I would pick my course, and then from my unit dropdown, I actually have access here to any unit that was shared with this course and has been archived. I can select it here. Oops. And I'm given the ability, if there had been scores entered previously here, I'm given the ability to amend or edit those scores as well. Okay. And within the Plan Beta tab, it looks just the same. You'll find it here. There's my sample 3 unit that we archived and my 2 archived assessments, and you can see these archived grades. Another important thing to note about archived information is that archiving does not delete or remove student scores from reports. They are still available to students. They're still available on all reports. If you are using the Legacy Plan tab, It is really important that you consider the date range that you have set up for your unit, because if your date range lies outside of any marking period or lies within any marking period, any reports, even of that archived unit, any reports will include all of the scores from that archived unit. So it's really important, if you're considering finalizing grades for a marking period, that your unit start and end dates align to that marking period. Otherwise, they'll show, the full unit will show on all reports. Okay. Excuse me. If you are using our Plan Beta tab, the unit dates are not as relevant. They actually, your reports will filter and show assessments based on assessment dates. So the unit dates are not as important. So an alternative, and this is for Plan Beta, an alternative, if you're a Plan Beta user, to archiving a unit. So in some cases, the teacher may not want to freeze all of the curriculum and kind of lose access to changing the curriculum, but they might have an unwieldy list of units. This list might get really long, but they still don't want to archive them. What you can do instead, from the Manage Units tab here, select a unit that maybe you're done with now. You don't want it to show on your Plan tab anymore, but you also don't want to freeze it. You don't want to archive it. If you select Edit here, you can simply remove this unit from all of your courses by unchecking all the boxes here. And this will make the unit, it won't be available in your grade tab for any of these courses, but it will still live on, right? So student scores that have been entered in this unit will still show on reports, but really what you're doing here is you're essentially removing it from the view of the unit list in the Plan and Grade tab. As soon as you're ready to look and make changes to it again, add it back to a course, make it accessible in a course again, and you'll see it pop up in that course list. So just another way that you can keep your Plan tab a little bit tidier as the year goes on. All right, so let's talk now about kind of our final big theme here, is how to access past scores, how to kind of finalize grades for students, and a discussion of how JumpRope handles that. So the first thing that we need to really take into consideration is that JumpRope does not give final grades. Really, all of the reports in JumpRope are real-time scores and calculations. So the power in our mastery reports is really that you can slice and dice the data however you need to make it actionable for you in your classroom and in your school. Now, to really finalize grades, what you want to do is kind of take a snapshot at a time period and export those grades. So if you have a need at this time to have a set of grades finalized for a certain marking period for your school, if you're an administrator and you have access to the back office of your school, in Mastery Reports, you can set the date that you want to run the Mastery Report for. So let's say my term began here, and then it ended last week or this Monday, right? So I want to find out what those scores were for this time period. I can load a mastery by student report. Okay. Once it loads, it will take a while, so I'm not going to load it here for us. Once it loads, from this settings menu here, oops, you'll want to run an export by student to Excel. And what that will do is take a snapshot of today's mastery reports for the selected date range. And that's going to essentially freeze those scores for you because, like we discussed just a little bit earlier, even if you archive a unit, JumpRope doesn't stop teachers from going back and making adjustments to the scores, past scores. So if you really want a frozen snapshot of what scores were at this moment today, running an export like this is your best option. So if you need to put final grades into an external sys, something of that nature, this is going to be the best thing for you to do. Excuse me. So a couple more things that happen at change of term that are kind of more teacher-related questions. Oftentimes during the fluctuations of the first couple of weeks of a new term, there are students change sections. Maybe a teacher has entered 2 or 3 scores for a student and then they switch math sections, and those scores for that student are still with that student's report, even if that teacher or that course, even if that student is no longer with that teacher or that course. JumpRope doesn't know whether or not you want those scores to transfer into the new section, whether you want them to still be displayed, or whether you want to delete them. So if, let's say that a student, whoops, let's pick Mary here. Let's say that she was in math section 1 and our teacher, or humanities section 1, and our teacher, Ms. Barnes, entered some scores for her. And then she switched to Mr. Adams' class. Ms. Barnes' scores are no longer relevant. Okay. What you can do here, in this menu, in the student tab, I searched for Mary in the search bar, I opened her student tab. What we can do is this advanced option called Clean Grade Modes. And I can choose to move those scores from the old course for Mary. I can move them right into her new math section using this function here, the move function. It asks you to enter the scores that you want, or the course that you want to move these scores into. Or I can, in fact, delete all of the scores related to that course. So those are the two kind of main options. Delete them all or move them to the new course. This is particularly helpful if the student's name is already removed from the old teacher's roster. If the student is still on the old teacher's roster, the teacher can simply delete all the scores directly from the grade tab as well. All right. So in general, those are kind of our biggest questions that people have, that users have, that come up during this term change. What I'd like to remind us all of now too is that if there was information today that's particular, that wasn't covered, that's really particular to your school, you have a special setup or something, please send us a request at support@jumprope, and we'll be really happy to work with your custom needs as well. I hope that everyone can have a smooth transition into the new term. And please, again, if you have any questions ever, let us know. support@jumprope.pe. We've recorded the session as well, and we'll be sending out information within the next week about that. But thank you all very much for joining us. We had a short time today, so I hope that you can all have a great evening. And join us again next month for our next webinar. Thanks and goodbye.